Hello and welcome to fifth episode of Unproduced. This time I want to look at the topic that I called Success is more personal than we think. The core idea behind this episode is that we compare ourselves to people without first asking whether we are trying to build the same life. Yes, I'm pretty sure that you've also found yourself in this situation because I definitely did many times. The longer I've been podcasting and speaking with founders, creators, and entrepreneurs, the more I've realized something. There isn't one definition of success. There are thousands. The mistake isn't comparison. The mistake is comparing two completely different scoreboards. And yes, believe me, speaking with people from all kinds of backgrounds, all kinds of careers, and different focuses, this question comes to my mind very frequently. As I said, recently, I've been thinking more about success. Not whether I'm successful, but what success actually means. Because it's one of those words everyone uses. I'm sure that you've used it many times, and whenever you open social media, I'm pretty sure that it comes to your mind as well. But very few people define it. We all say that we want to be successful, but successful at what? Is it building a business, having freedom, creating great work, maybe raising a family, being healthy, making money, or having impact? It really differs, whether it's for different people, different stages of life, or maybe based on your circumstances. Here's an interesting observation. Success is one of the few goals people chase before defining it. So let's look at a question that will be worth exploring. Have you actually ever written down what success means to you? And are you chasing your definition of success or definition of someone else? And now, it doesn't necessarily need to be someone you've seen on social media. You see people and you want to reach their level, you want to reach their status, maybe fame, maybe let's say numbers, whether it's LinkedIn, number of clients, Instagram, beautiful lifestyle, and I'm sure that you can see loads of other examples. But interesting point is that it doesn't necessarily need to be. Actually, recently I did a podcast episode that I think perfectly fits to this scenario. As you know, everyone obviously comes from different background, whether it's different location, different status of your family, and just different part of the world. And I spoke with someone, and when we discussed that person's career, that person was studying certain field that was basically defined by parents. I guess now you see where I'm coming from, because in certain cultures or just people with different upbringings, they need to, or they feel the pressure to follow specific type of career because that's what's accepted. Maybe that's what people see as definition of success, or those are just expectations. So where I'm coming with this, it doesn't necessarily need to be success that you see on social media, but it can be success from pressure of your family. Now it's quite different. Obviously, you don't want to disappoint your closest ones, right? So it was interesting example that I heard on the podcast, and believe me, it wasn't for the first time actually. Now back to the questions that I mentioned. We can be looking at people online and automatically assume that's what success should look like. But again, it's different based on specific platform, people that you follow, and primarily, again, this is the topic that I discussed many times across Unproduced, is that you never know what's the full picture. You don't know the context, you don't know if it's true, you don't know the background, you don't know, maybe it was luck, maybe it was years of hard work, maybe it's not true at all. So once again, we never see the full picture. And podcasting has made me realize how different everyone's answer actually is. One thing that podcasting has taught me is that people I've interviewed don't all want the same life. I know it may sound obvious now, but again, usually people chase followers, numbers, fame, and you know where I'm going with that. For example, some people optimize for money, others optimize for freedom, others want recognition, others want creativity, others want family, or simply they might want peace. I think this can be very well combined to LinkedIn, actually. It's one of the recurring themes across Produced By, one of very important pieces of advice that I would share with people as well, and something that I think is very important for anyone on the platform, which is you need to know what's your purpose on the platform, why you are there in the first place, what are your goals. For one person, it may be to get clients. For next person, it may be to build the brand. Another one, maybe chase followers. And every one is different. And this is the same. So interesting observation is that from the outside, they all look successful. But from the inside, they're solving completely different problems. So, why do you think that we compare ourselves without understanding someone else's goals? And can two people both be successful while wanting opposite things? Now, as I say this, I find it quite obvious. But how often actually we think about things like this? And more importantly, when does it actually makes us question our own definition of success? Some possible stories might be guests from Produced By. Again, although there is one focus in Produced By, which is obviously creators from LinkedIn, every person is different with different goals, different ambitions, different circumstances, and I could continue. Which means that everyone also has a different definition of success. Let me give you some interesting lines or memorable lines that I wrote down. Different goals create different scoreboards. And stop comparing your progress in someone else's game. Something that we discussed many times across Unproduced. Because maybe comparison isn't really the problem. Maybe misunderstanding success is. Social media compresses thousands of different lives into one feed. And then our brain quietly creates one definition of success. Followers, money, growth, recognition, and I could continue. As you are most likely here from LinkedIn, you know where I'm coming from. I mentioned it many times, but I think where it's even more relevant is Instagram, because there you open it and mostly you see highlights of people's lives. Polished life, beautiful summer bodies, amazing holidays, new car, materialistic life, and I could continue. Of course, not everyone is the same, but open it and you'll see by yourself. Here's an interesting observation. Algorithms don't reward meaningful lives. They reward visible lives, and that's a huge difference. I have to admit that I'm not surprised, because obviously, if it's a visible life, it means that people are going to talk about it. Let's be honest, it looks probably better in the feed, and that is something that people discussed. But then it comes down to does it mean that visible life is the life that is actually worth paying attention to? It's similar to the fact that the people that are loud, for example, on social media, on LinkedIn, doesn't mean that they are necessarily worth listening to. Here are some questions. How much of what you want to have you genuinely chose? And how much have you absorbed? Some possible examples. Again, LinkedIn or podcasting, creators, or business. Think about it. Some memorable lines. Visibility isn't the same as fulfillment. Actually, I remember today or maybe yesterday, I read someone's post where it was basically around this idea of visible, of loud, doesn't necessarily mean worth listening to. Which also reminds me that there are so many people that are worth listening to, but simply are not visible. Whether it's they don't know how to get visibility, they might not want to, they might be struggling, or some other reasons. So it makes one wary, or it actually reminds you to be cautious about who you are listening to and why. And the more I think about this, the more I think success has become too public. Here's an interesting reflection. Some of the best parts of my life never appear online, such as conversations, friendships, training, walking, health, family, reading, or thinking. And I'm pretty sure that you can relate to this. And none of those receive likes. Yet they probably matter more than anything that I post. I know it depends on everyone and what people actually want to share, because there are some people who obviously share more of their personal life and share pretty much everything, usually on Instagram, which is more personal, but you can see it on LinkedIn too. Now, don't get me wrong, I know that sometimes or oftentimes it's good to share something from your personal life, such as make it more relatable, more personal, and show some kind of behind the scenes. But I'm sure that you know what I mean by this. Here's an interesting observation that the most meaningful parts of life usually happen when nobody is watching. It can be that conversation, experience with your friends, adventures with your family, and more. Here's a question for you. If social media disappeared tomorrow, would your priorities change? That's a good one. Or that's a tough one, especially for people who use social media for their career, for their business, or for majority of us that use it that specifically focus on LinkedIn, or they build communities and simply use it for much more than just for fun. So some possible examples of priorities that could change would be health, friends, your morning routine, walking, jiu-jitsu, and many more. Here's an interesting thought for you. I don't think that success has one definition. I think it actually changes. At 20, success meant proving myself. Maybe now, it means building a life I actually enjoy living. And in 10, 20 years, we'll see what it actually means. But I'm pretty sure it's going to change again. Let's look at some questions. Should our definition of success evolve? What did success mean 5 years ago? What does it mean today? Take a moment and try to answer this. As I say this, it makes me think as well. Possible examples can be university. I still remember a few years ago. Produced by. I also remember before when there was no produced by, obviously. Then it changed it when I started, and then it's different now. And who knows about the future? Then it can be business. It can be unproduced, as I'm recording now. It can be health or freedom, and I could continue. Time for a little reflection. I'm trying to become more intentional. Not about working less, but about knowing why I'm working. I know, now it sounds obvious. Why would you work if you don't know why? But it's not as easy as it sounds. It actually reminds me of amazing Produced by episode that I recorded recently as well, when we discussed the guest's why. You can call it why, you can call it a mission, or it can be simply why are you showing up? And despite years of showing up, doing the hard work, that person really inspired me because it was someone very successful. You could hear and see from the discussion that very passionate about it. I can safely say that doing the great work on a high level and still excited, passionate, and doing the great stuff. So this is really important. And it made me think about it again as well. Some possible reflections can be doing the meaningful work, having interesting conversations, whether on the podcast or outside, your freedom, health, relationships, curiosity, building slowly, your creative freedom, and many more. Here's an observation. You don't need to apologize for wanting something different. Actually, I think oftentimes it's a good thing. Why would you want something same if it's not fulfilling anymore, if you don't enjoy it, if it's not progressing? Then it might be just better to switch, better to change, find something else, something different, something that makes you excited again. I think it's natural. I've got questions for you. What are you actually optimizing for? And secondly, would you still want this if nobody could see it? Think about it. Let's slowly wrap this up. Podcasting has shown me something I didn't expect. Some people with millions feel behind. Some people with very little feel fulfilled. Whether it's the conversations that I did, or on social media that you can see, or people that you talk to. Perfect example or a comparison here. You see someone on LinkedIn with 10k, 50k, 100k followers. And you never know if that person might be just chasing likes and struggling in the background, compared to someone who might have hundreds or just a few thousands of followers and in the background doing extremely well. Because you don't know what's happening behind the scenes, you don't know what's their primary goal to be on LinkedIn in the first place, and maybe they have different platform, different goals, different business. One never knows. And that's made me realize that success isn't something that you find. It's something that you define. Because maybe the most important decision we'll ever make isn't how hard we work. It's deciding what we're actually working towards. I'm sure that you know the saying that whether you know where you are going to or not, you'll get there. Because if we never define success ourselves, someone else eventually will. Now, I'm not sure if it was a quote that I read or that I heard, or it's like a saying that's very popular and people mention a lot online, but I've heard this many times. That if you don't define success by yourself, someone else will. I've got final question for you. If nobody else had an opinion, what would success genuinely look like to you? Feel free to let me know. As always, thank you for listening.